they met him. Somebody says, what about Travolta? What about John Travolta? Well, I have a John Travolta song, John Travolta story. My son and I were sitting at a diner that we used to frequent in Clearwater. It was breakfast time, and it's just the two of us in there, and in walks John Travolta, sits down, walks up to us, says, can I sit down here? Is in this seat taken? No, sit down. So we had breakfast with Tom Cruise. My son was so blown away, he couldn't even talk to him. We talked about flying planes. We talked about his movies. And John Travolta, super nice guy. I know that there's some questions about some of the things that John Travolta likes to do, like, Alfred is here telling us he's this and he's that, and that may well be, but he was a pretty cool guy to me, so that's all I know. And John Travolta tried to buy my breakfast, my son's breakfast. I'm like, no, John, we got it. So we've had Tom Cruise stories, we've had John Travolta stories, and one last thing as we bring the doctor in, I used to do a little bit of the spirit box stuff, the ghost hunting. And I was downtown and I picked up an EVP of Ron Hubbard saying, ARC, baby. If you know anything about Scientology, you know what that is. So anyway, I don't know anything about their connections to the Process Church, but I do know that Dr. Longo is in the house. So what do you say? We bring him on in. Here he is, the man, the myth, the legend, the way of life. It's your fearless leader, Dr. Longo. What's up, brother?
Hey, Jeffrey. Good to see you again.
You got a different background today.
I just flipped the camera.
Oh, I see.
The other way around.
Dude, one of these days, I'm going to get to your bookstore. I think I told you the other day that I thought I'd never go back to Florida, but after being exposed to, your content, it's kind of restirred that love of Florida back in me. I'm a lifelong Floridian, so
Shall yeah, love to
we'll
hear
see
it.
you one of these days, man. We'll see you.
Yeah,
I'm loving interacting with your crowd, but I think they're here to see you, not me. So why don't you go ahead and chug some Coca-Cola and talk to us about giants?
Well, where do you want to start with it? I plan on talking about Florida giants, especially,
So we know there's giants all over the place, but you're especially talking about Florida giants.
Yeah. And of
I'm
course,
not one. I'm only 5'11". I wish I'd have got some of those genes.
That's tall enough, man. That's mighty tall. You'd be okay. Basically, we can always start, these stories with the discovery of North America.
Right.
We can always start this saying kind of our mainstream history kind of picks up with the Spanish bumping into Florida. So 1513, you've got Ponce de Leon sailing into Florida. First the East Coast, then he went back again on the West Coast. But Ponce de Leon, he didn't get a good look at the people there, right? The first time they went through, they didn't really hang out much, maybe passed some fruit and traded a little bit,
right,
with some of the natives in canoes. But we don't really get a real full description from Ponce de Leon's voyage, so the first one or two. It's not until kind of the Narvaez expedition, 1528, when we start getting accounts of giant Indians.
So, Dr. Longo, would this be the first accounts that we've heard in the West about these people?
Yeah, there might have been some already from the Caribbean and the coast of South America, maybe. The Patagonians are also notable giants. I don't know how early they got discovered. But I know that 1528, we get kind of the first real well-written description of the Florida Indians from an eyewitness account. There's also around 1521 or so, we have slave traders who are catching Indians from the south coast of Florida up to Georgia, up even to South Carolina. And they're saying the people that they're catching, they called gigantes.
Really?
And they would fetch a double price. So, we're talking tall enough to fetch double price.
Well, how could they catch these big, tall, strong dudes?
I don't know. A lot of them were friendly to start off, so maybe by deceit.
You think they might have plied them with some rum or something like that, or some smokable delicacies?
Usually what they would do is they just somehow entreat them onto the boat and just sail away,
Oh, that's right. Let me show you the puppy in the back of my van. Not to say they were all pedophiles, but
no, yeah. The Spanish were freaks. The conquistadors would bang anything that moved.
Now, we talked last time about some of our Jewish friends that were getting kicked out of Europe and were, in the Caribbean raiding and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Were they involved in this as well?
Of course. They would have been. Mainly, this first kind of account from a slave trader comes from this guy. I think his name was Lucas Vasquez de Ayllón, maybe. I think I could be wrong on that. But it's an account of slave traders talking about who they saw on the east coast of America, especially Florida.
Interesting.
They called them gigantes. That wasn't just, we saw something that looked like a giant. No, they chained them up. They brought them to the Caribbean and sold them for twice the price.
Wow.
So people can look that up for themselves. Then we go to 1528 or so. You have the Narvaez expedition goes missing. Pretty much goes missing. That's about 200 men who land near Tampa Bay. It's a Spanish ship, right? A lot of different ethnicities on the ship, but mostly Spanish. They go in, and enough of them survived, not many, but enough survived to make a written account, a full description of the Indians that they saw there, who was attacking them.
Crazy.
For those who don't know, the Narvaez expedition started out near Tampa Bay and pretty much died out around the Gulf of Mexico. Only about 4 of these guys made it around the coast to Mexico, where they reunited with the Spanish.
Now, were they being attacked along the whole way, Doctor?
For most of their way through Florida, until we can talk about this another time. Again, we got to talk about Christianity one day. This is
We'll do it next time for sure. I'm looking forward to it. So, I mean, if I'm just thinking that if the gigantes, one of them gets snagged, the word gets around. So maybe when these guys showed up, they were waiting for him and they had a little something for him.
I don't know. But that I bring up Christianity because these 4 survivors, they were fighting their way through Florida. They try and sail their way out across Texas. They get shipwrecked. And then these 4 survivors, they made their way down through Mexico by bringing peace to all the Indian nations they found, because they were the first Christian influence to come through. And they had a cross. They did miracles. And these 4 guys earned a reputation as miracle workers and things like that. So
Who were those guys again?
There was Cabeza de Vaca. There's a movie about him. There was his friend.
So they were Spaniards.
A black guy. They were Spaniards, yeah. And then he had a friend, a black guy, who I'm blanking his name, but he was one of the first black guys to go through America.
Interesting.
And so basically, they went through, and one of them wrote an account. There was also some other accounts from the Narvaez expedition that kind of made it out from survivors or people who had gone looking for them, at least. That's another famous account that we get about early Florida, is another guy who kind of got shipwrecked on the Florida coast looking for that party that disappeared. His name's Juan Ortiz.
Gotcha.
That's Juan Ortiz. He's the inspiration for John Smith. Total fake story. John Smith took the Pocahontas story. This is no conspiracy theory. He took the Pocahontas story from Tampa Bay.
Are you serious, bro?
I swear to God, she's the most famous Native American there is, isn't she?
Wow. Yeah, and that's from my hometown. What do you say about this question here on the screen? Can you see it?
I've seen some convincing videos of people, just like people who look like they might have giganticism.
Right.
But then there's those fake AI videos where it's like, looks like it's AI, looks like it's not real.
So you're telling me Pocahontas was from Tampa Bay?
Yep, Juan Ortiz.
Amazing.
Juan Ortiz is pretty much like the Spanish John Smith.
Gotcha.
John Smith, in his first 1 or 2 accounts of his time at Virginia, made no mention of Pocahontas. It wasn't until he heard the story about this guy who got shipwrecked near Tampa Bay that they wrote it into the Jamestown story to make it more interesting. Why'd they do that? Because the Jamestown colonists were cannibals. They had to lighten up the story. They had to have some... It's like when the Navy SEALs have a mission go wrong, they have a hero movie come out to like...
Ooh, interesting.
Lighten the day, like, oh, it was a disaster, but there was a hero in the midst of it, kind of.
So, Dr. Longo, did you just say that the white colonists of Jamestown were cannibals?
Yeah, they resorted to cannibalism. And one of these guys, the guy who kind of took over after John Smith, he made a joke about, I've heard of bad dishes. He was writing back to England. He's like, I've heard of bad dishes. I've heard of, untasty food, not so tasty food. He's like, but boiled wife, I have never heard of. He's like, boiled wife, I had never suspected, And he said that people at Jamestown were eating their wives, not just cannibalism, but their own wives.
Well, that's one way to get a divorce, right? Now, my son, who's a huge fan of your channel,
they call that a Puritan divorce, by the way.
That's awesome. My son, who's a big fan of your channel, he claims he heard from you, so I'll give you a chance to confirm or deny that barbecue was probably invented by Florida, and it was these giants eating people.
Yeah, that actually goes back to the Juan Ortiz story.
Wow.
He was captured. If you've ever seen Apocalypto, Mel Gibson movie,
I didn't watch it because it wasn't in English. How shallow am I?
That's all right. Well, there's a scene in there that also kind of took inspiration from the Juan Ortiz story in Tampa Bay. And this does all relate to giants because the Tocobaga, or the people of Tampa Bay, and the Timucua speaking people of North and Central Florida, they were above average height, certainly. Now, it was usually their chiefs who were the real 8-foot giants, but we're talking 6.5 feet kind of average for the men, for the warriors. These guys were tall.
Shem is in the chat, by the way.
Shem?
Yeah.
Shout out.
So there's eating your wife, then there's eating your wife, right? So wow.
Well, barbecue, they tried to do that to Juan Ortiz, but he got rescued by one of the princesses who vouched for him, and said, oh, he'll make him a servant, he'll be our servant, let him stay alive, because he was kind of young. He was maybe 18 or so.
Interesting.
But they slaughtered his 2 or 3 other friends that landed on the beach with him. Here's the story. They were looking for the Narvaez expedition that went missing.
Right.
And just to tie it back to giants, the Narvaez expedition, the survivors, they wrote about giant men. They said they looked, appeared, and fought like giants. That their bows were as broad as a bicep. Their bow, an English hand would be struggling to kind of get their hand all the way around it. And that a Spaniard could not even draw the bow all the way back without using their legs to,
wow,
to kind of crank it. So right off there, we're talking about strong people. Their arrows could go through thin trees, could bust right through a thin tree. They had coral-tipped arrows, conch shell-tipped arrows, shark tooth, bits of copper, bits of iron that they got off of, Spanish shipwrecks and things like that. Anything they could. They were tremendous at building bows and making arrows. And the bows, it's worth mentioning, they were like neon pink, neon orange, neon blue.
Where were they getting the color from?
They had all these dyes. They also had tapestries that they said were better than some of the artwork in the royal halls of Europe.
Amazing. Did Joseph Smith run into any of these giants? Have you heard anything like that?
Joseph Smith or John Smith?
Well, somebody here said Joseph Smith, one of your great followers.
Yeah, I don't know too much, but I know that as they were walking across the Midwest or Northeast America to the Midwest, kind of, when they're kind of doing a long walk or migration at one point, they're walking through some mounds, like walking through mound sites, and they're seeing bones of Native Americans, large Native Americans. And I think this might be what they're referring to, but Joseph Smith said something along the lines of, these are the bones of the people that I'm talking about in the Book of Mormon.
Interesting. Fascinating.
And we're going to get to the bones here, but I wanted to start out with the eyewitness accounts, right?
Absolutely. I'll hush and let you go.
No, it's okay. Pop in whenever. The first, so Ponce de Leon voyage, we don't get a description on the people. Ponce de Leon got mortally wounded on the second trip. They had to get out of there real quick. They didn't spend much time or measure any people.
Do you think he got wounded by one of these great bows that you just talked about?
They say it was an addle-addle, that it was an addle-addle point dipped in the poison of what's known as the manchineel fruit.
Ooh.
The manchineel is what's considered the deadliest fruit or the most dangerous fruit in the world. And it grows on the southern tips of Florida. Amazing.
I wonder if one of those bows would have gone through the hull of one of the wooden ships.
I don't know, but it would. They did skewer horses, or not skewer, but go through a horse long ways.
Oh,
I heard that these arrows or addle points would go straight through a horse long ways if it wasn't kind of armored, and they had to take the armor off their horses because they couldn't cross water with the heavy kind of covering on. So they were largely helpless a lot of the time, just getting picked off by tall bow, archers.
Crazy. Aurora wants to know, why have we been lied to about giants? Why are they keeping that information from us?
They validate the Bible. They validate, and it's not just a Bible thing. They validate like the world mythologies, across the board, right? There's even the Book of Mormon. There's tales of giants. There's tales of, so pick your cosmology, pick your religion, whatever. Giants don't fit into the out of Africa model. They don't fit into the evolution model. They don't fit into that's pretty much it. Human origins would have to kind of be retold, right?
You can't have that.
That's my take on it, is why it's such a touchy subject. That's really it. They want us to go from chimpanzee, hunched over chimpanzee, to tall, upright human.
And my wife's a little older than me, Dr. Longo, and she recalls that when she was a girl in school, she went to Catholic schools, and they were studying about and would read about and would see a lot about giant skeletons. Then all of a sudden it just disappeared, and they try to pretend that it never happened.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think that is largely what the dinosaur agenda was, to dispose of all the big bones that people were finding.
So we can explain them away by these giant lizards when it really wasn't.
Yeah. Oh, did you find something that looks just like a human, but 1.5 times bigger? Oh, that was a giant sloth. I'm not saying giant sloths are fake. There are extinct animals. There are things that we can go find in the rivers and springs of Florida to this day. The giant bones were usually put in the mounds, Indian
Wow.
mounds, burial mounds. They were interred with care and kind of respect, you know. Well, here, Tampa Bay was one of the last mound cultures to be alive in the United States when the Spanish showed up. So there's mounds all over, but a lot of them actually had gone out of popularity. You know, the religion had kind of changed, whatever it was. The mound culture wasn't as big of a thing. These big temple mounds, right? They'd do ceremonies up on top. And well, some say the Mormons had a lot to do with that, with the Mormon story about how that culture kind of disappeared or died out. But in Tampa Bay, we still have a mound culture. I think they call them it's over at Philippi Park.
Yes, I've been there many times.
Cool. It's called the Safety Harbor culture, or they're a branch of the Timucua or the Tocobaga Indians. They were tall.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
My dad, I'm just remembering this, he's not with us anymore, but he used to go out and do all kinds of hunting around, and he actually found one time an arrowhead that was bigger than his hand. So,
right.
Yeah, interesting. And it wasn't a spear thing, it was an arrowhead. So, yeah, this is crazy, man.
Yep, that's another clue. There are clues like that. So the Spanish, 1528 or so, the Spanish are giving, you know, strong accounts of abnormally tall people with abnormally large weapons. And they're being matter of fact about it. And another part of this is, so we're at 1528 here, and this guy's name, I think, is Lucas Vasquez de Ayllón. He gives a written account. It's a first-hand account of somebody that was there. I don't know if that's his account, but he's popular for writing it. They talk about the bows, the penetration of the arrows being, like, you know, ridiculous, and all that stuff. And they say these people, they largely went naked, you know, not much clothing, but they looked like giants. They were tall. And that they were fit. They weren't just like lanky or, you know, they were fit. They were athletic, strong, well over the average height of the Spanish.
And that speaks to your point that you made, I think, last time we talked, or maybe I heard it in one of your videos, that, you know, back to Florida being the Garden of Eden, Florida was one of the few places in the world, or at least in the known world, that you could basically go naked all year long. You know, if you, I think you said if you had somebody to cuddle up with at night, it would be helpful, but you could do it.
Yeah, 100%. Now, these people that they're seeing, right off the bat, it's been said, it's well recognized that the Spanish reported giants in Florida. Nobody really denies that. The national parks will tell you that to this day. They'll just gaslight you, or gaslight, you know, them, and say, oh, they were too fanciful. They were too, you know, it was such exotic stimuli, you know, to come into Florida, the new vegetation, to see people that dress different, to be fighting men that, yeah, maybe above average, but they kind of just gaslight and say, well, they just kind of thought they were tall, or they wrote that they were tall in order to inspire interest for other explorers to come see. Well, it seems like the way that they write it, it's like nobody's coming back. Okay, we're talking 7 feet tall, people shooting arrows through trees, you can't even hide. That's not someone saying, oh, hey, let's exaggerate their height to make it easier for the next guys to come around.
Right.
No, it's gonna dissuade people from coming back. But they did go back, and they did go back. Another way that they gaslight people, that the Smithsonian and the national parks, state parks gaslight people, is they say, oh, well, the Spanish were typically short. The Spanish were typically very short. You know, 5.5 feet would have been considered pretty tall, right? And Ponce de Leon, for example, he was only 4'11", we're told. Well, And they say they will concede, oh yeah, and the Indians, they averaged close to 6 foot. So they were, a 5 foot tall and a 6 foot tall person. If you're playing basketball against each other, that's like a world of difference,
Absolutely.
And that's another way that they try and say, oh no, don't trust those Spanish accounts. Those aren't trustworthy. Well, guess what? If we do our research, we can get around that. Okay. And these people who work at the parks, they really don't know a lot of this stuff. They haven't dug into the literature. They haven't dug into the firsthand accounts. They take what comes down from them. We have evidence of that in some of my videos where they don't know anything about the native history, but they will affirm positions like that. Like, no, they were average height, No. That's not a conversation we're willing to have.
Right.
Well, Narvaez, Panfilo de Narvaez, or Panfilo Narvaez, the guy who led this expedition around 1527 or 1528. He was 6'2".
Wow.
We know that. He was 6'2". I mean, that's tall, very tall by today's standards,
Mm-hmm.
He was a Spaniard. He's eating the same diet as everybody else. I've got other, the French showed up. We'll get to the French. That's 1560s or so. But Panfilo de Narvaez, the guy who's leading this expedition, he's 6'2". He's not going to, he might have a 4'11" guy next to him, but the 4'11" guy is not going to call an Indian a giant if he's not going to call his captain a giant. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they knew the typical span of human height. So that gaslighting doesn't work if we do a little bit of homework. That tactic doesn't work. Okay.
Now, Lincoln was supposedly afflicted, if you will, with gigantism, right?
I don't know if he had giganticism, but I think he was 6'4" or 6'6",
Okay.
6'4", and he looked like a giant with a tall hat on, And,
True.
he definitely had like prominent bones, like maybe over, just a very bony person, maybe an overdevelopment of the bones. His face kind of looked like that, but he was a tall guy, and he himself talks about giants in the mounds of America.
Right.
They also try and gaslight us on that too, and say, oh, no, he was talking about the mammoths and the mastodons. But if you read that account, and we can pull it up if you want, it's in his Niagara address, I think they call it. It's in a letter that he's writing about a speech that he might give or did give in Niagara. And he's talking about the Niagara Falls. He's talking about all the things they've seen in America's prehistory. And he says mammoths and mastodons. But then, before he gets to mammoths and mastodons, I think, he says, the bones of that race of giants in the mounds. You don't put mammoth bones in mounds.
No.
And you don't say a race of giants. He said race of giants, and he said in the mounds of America. He's talking about giants.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do we have records of white giants, or do they all tend to be dark skinned?
That's a good question. On the South Carolina and Georgia coast, remember I said they were doing a lot of slave trading and things like that. There was one tribe who seems to have been a group of tall Irish people.
Really?
They're called the Duhar. The Duhair or the Duhar. I mean, that even sounds Irish,
It does.
The Duhair, Duhari. They are, this almost sounds like your last name.
It does.
Almost, yeah. They wrote about these people and said that they had reddish hair, pale skin, and guess what? They milked deer and made cheese and dairy products out of deer milk. They herded deer, and that alone sets them apart and made them of notable interest because the other Indians were not interested in dairy at all, and they really didn't even herd animals. You know, even if they liked to eat the animal, they didn't think to really herd them too much. You know, that was really like largely a European, you know, kind of gift to the Americans, was herding large game. You know, they would chase
people and your subscribers, Dr. Longo.
I've got some funny people, you said?
Jokesters. They got some good jokes, man. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. How many people we got in here tonight?
Looks like about 512 right now.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a nice little group.
Cool. Well, white giants, we look to South Carolina. You know, there's also that, which was known as La Florida originally. At least in this European memory. Spanish, when the Spanish came to Florida, they claimed all of North America as La Florida. Okay? That included South Carolina. That included Texas. You know, that was all La Florida for decades and decades until each of the territories starts getting their own names. That was all La Florida. And South Carolina was also one of the earliest places to kind of be settled or explored. And the Huguenots went to South Carolina, Northeast Florida.
Right.
They reported giants too. But just to touch on the white giants, the Daugherty, they were said to have a king known as King Datha or Data. Datha or Data, they say his name was.
Sounds like Duatha, like the Tua.
Almost, yeah. Yeah, the Tuatha de Danann, however you'd say that. That there is a connection there, I would guess.
I would guess too.
And he was said to be very, very tall. Very, very tall. That these were already a tall group of Indians, but that King Datha or Data was exceptionally tall. Maybe even 8 feet or so.
Wow.
That he was, they'd often say that we were at his waist. You know, like our average height man was close to his waist, right? Now, we can leave some room for exaggeration always, but we're talking over 7 feet. I mean, you're not going to say that about someone who's not 7 feet tall, you know? And 7 feet tall is a giant in my eyes.
Absolutely.
I've been next to people who are, you know, Shaquille O'Neal's height. They're giants, you know. They're giants. Even if I'm over 6 feet and someone is close to 7 feet, you know, size is like, it's like compounding almost like this. You know, the taller you are, every inch you get over 6.5 feet, you grow like 4 inches wider almost. You know, it's.
Yeah, I've stood next to Shaq, and it's scary. It really is. The guy is just freaking huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've got people in Florida to this day. We have the tallest teenager in the world who's playing basketball in Florida, University of Florida. He's a Gator. 7'9". His name is Olivier Rioux. He's a French Canadian.
Ooh.
Irish and French Canadian who's playing basketball in Florida. I think he felt drawn here. It's the Giants' memory deep down in his DNA. He went to high school in Florida, and he chose to stay there for college. So I think that says something. It's a good place. Giants feel at home here. Okay.
Somebody says that's why Barron's down there at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, I think Florida can claim a couple of those inches. I think we contributed at least a couple of those inches to his height. But so, white giants near South Carolina. You know, everyone knows about the Lovelock giants too, the cave. You know about this? I think it's Nevada or Utah. Not my expertise, not my jurisdiction, really, but there are other stories of white giants. There's stories of black giants too. Right. I've got a good one. But let's just go back to Tampa Bay, 1528. We've got the Narvaez expedition goes missing. They talk about giants. Who's the next kind of big group to come around? 1538, 1539. You've got Hernando de Soto comes in. They land around Tampa Bay too. They get off with, I think something like 800 men, 800 people. They've got horses, they've got guns, they've got everything. They've got cannons. They are ready to rock. The Spanish said, "Yep, this is where we want to go. We're sending the big guns." Before then, it was kind of just dipping their toes in, seeing if Florida was worth the trouble. This was a settlement party. They were there to settle, build a fort and settle. Well, they only got as far as Louisiana, maybe, or near Texas. They also, after suffering so many losses, ended up getting in boats and trying to escape to Texas. That's how the expedition ended up. But first they land in Tampa Bay, and they are fighting their way through the Gulf Coast of Florida, around up till they get to like Louisiana. They're encountering giants left and right. Wow. Above average, and we have multiple reliable, like, academic accounts from that expedition. Now, here's why I really want to talk about that expedition. This was 1539. It's led by the Spanish, but a lot of the men fighting on this Spanish expedition are Inca noblemen, Inca warriors, who had now been brought under the fold of the Spanish military. They're now contributing manpower to Spanish expeditions across the other territories. And the Inca were like, yeah, this is cool. The Inca were kind of, I'm not Inca, I wasn't there, but they kind of got along with the Spanish, at least early on, where they were like an empire already. They had kind of, they were interested in conquest too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They didn't kind of just take like a slave rule. Once they got ruled, they were like, okay, we're noblemen, we can fight. Keep us where we're valuable. We can offer assistance in the military. So a lot of these Inca, and some of them were half, breed, kind of mixed in with Spanish, the children of Spanish conquistadors, but a lot of them were just Inca with royal Inca blood. So this book, one of the principal accounts of this expedition was what was I talking about?
We were talking about the Incas wanting to be part
of.
Thank you. There you go.
So one of the principal accounts of this expedition is called La Florida del Inca. And I saw that title and I was like, what the heck? The Inca were in Florida? Is that about like a lost Inca city or something? And no, it's kind of a second-hand account of this expedition from the perspective of a Inca warrior, an Inca nobleman who's fighting alongside the Spanish against Florida Indians. And I bring that up because this dispels another one of the myths that we hear about giants in early America, is that the Europeans were so overstimulated by everything they saw that they would kind of exaggerate everything, not get a good view, and kind of go with the more exaggerated details. It's said that the Spanish romanticized a lot of what they saw, is what I'm getting at. An Inca soldier, however, has no reason to exaggerate what they're seeing. Has no reason to kind of impress the king with what they're seeing, the Spanish king. So you can't say that's Spanish propaganda.
No.
This is an Inca guy, and they're giving accounts of multiple races of giants in America. And when I say giant, I'm talking anything over 6.5 feet. But when I really say giant, we're talking in the ballpark of 8 to 9 feet. some of
Wow.
these chiefs, some of these extraordinarily tall people. There's even one that we have good, overwhelming firsthand accounts saying this one guy, where we get the name for the city Tuscaloosa,
Tuscaloosa.
from Tascaloosa. They say he was 10 feet tall.
10
say-
feet tall.
They say that when he got on a horse, they couldn't put him on a horse because his feet would touch the ground. Can you imagine that? A
amazing.
7-foot person can get on a horse and their feet aren't going anywhere close to the ground. Okay. A 10-foot person, they say. He would sit down in a stool and still be taller than everyone around him.
It's amazing.
And a lot of times in this old kind of brutal tribal culture, they would just pick the tallest guy around to be chief. Seriously. So the Hernando de Soto expedition is going around. They're coming around the Gulf of Mexico, the coast. They're tracing the coast. And they're encountering, 6.5 feet. They're saying, yeah, these guys were above average. It was every time we got into a fight, it was a tough fight. They could shoot their arrows from twice the distance that we could shoot ours. It was tough, but they also never got a too good of a look at them because they're kind of fighting their way through Florida.
Right.
Well, then they get to about Alabama. Okay. And they meet Tascaloosa, close to Alabama. We don't know exactly where the DeSoto expedition made it through, but we know that they reached the Mississippi and that they kind of left through the Mississippi. But somewhere around Alabama, hence Tuscaloosa, Alabama,
Right.
they came in contact with a great city, a fortified city with wooden walls, with towers, armaments, This was a fortress, a big fortress. And that was, I think, the people there. I don't think they were, I'm blanking on the tribe name, but this chief, he was in charge of a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people. And when they went to meet him, they were greeted by his son. So everyone can go look this up if they want. It's in La Florida del Inca. It's in the account given by the gentleman of Elvas. There's different, multiple accounts of the same story, that they approached the city and they were greeted by Tascaloosa's son, the prince. And he was taller than all the Indians that they had seen up until then. He was taller than every person they had ever seen in their life, back in Europe here, that he was the tallest human they'd ever seen, unanimously.
Taller than his dad?
They hadn't met his dad yet.
Okay.
They were already blown away by his son. Then they get led into the city and they meet his dad. And then they're like, oh my God.
Holy crap.
He's even taller than this kid. And they try and put him on a horse out of respect,
Right.
And at this point, they're getting along. DeSoto's able to they're still at they're still being given hospitality by these Indians. So they'd been fighting their way through Florida. They were feeling relieved to find Indians who had a city, who were kind of a little bit more civilized, willing to sit down with them and, talk things out. Well, and Tascaloosa was their chief. Tascaloosa is said to mean black warrior.
Interesting.
Or black man. Now, they don't say that he was super dark, but they do say that he was darker than most of the Indians that they had seen up until then, and that his own people called him the Black Chief or the Black Warrior. While they're going on this expedition, before they got to that point, they had a black man with them go missing because the queen of another nation had claimed him and convinced him to sneak away from the Spanish because he was kind of a slave a little bit. And he goes from slave to king of an Indian nation because a queen wanted to bang him.
Hey, when a queen wants to bang you, you just do what you do, man.
Ancient American mud sharks. Okay. And
that's where we were at over 600 for a second there, just to let you know.
Nice. Well, so they're having things like that go on. So there's a little bit something to this about black people kind of being gifted leadership positions in early America. Whether that was like a superstition thing, or whether that was if black, dark color held a significance to them, I don't know.
Very interesting.
But we do know that on that same expedition, a black guy ran away and fell in love with the queen of the city that they had just left. She convinced him to stay and to be her secret lover. And they said, all right, screw him. We're going on.
How much convincing does it take when you're a slave and this queen wants you to come be king? I'd be like, okay.
I know.
You had me at hello.
They also, on this expedition, they came across an Indian ruler who was so fat that he could not stand up or sit up.
And he was the ruler?
Yeah. So people talk about the seed oils and, the bad stuff. There was fat people before. Okay.
So he was like that Star Trek, or not the Star Wars guy, Jabba the Hutt, huh?
He was.
Wow.
He was. He got kidnapped by the Spanish, and in the middle of the night, he rolled away.
Are you serious?
And his people found him. People got him.
Why didn't those people that were barbecuing people get him? I mean, that's a lot of damn barbecue, right?
They were very superstitious, and they had a great respect for authority, or like lineage, and
gotcha.
Yeah, a lot of weird stories. But La Florida del Inca is one of the most interesting stories I've ever read. It's like the Lawrence of Arabia of early America. We're gonna try and publish that book soon too. But okay, so there
guy was in Florida. I mean, he could have rolled a lot easier if maybe he was up with some hills or something. But Florida, that's a lot of work, man. Rolling, no inertia. You can't build anything up. You're just rolling.
Yep, he got away. And so let's go back to Tascaloosa. The Spanish are being village. He's tall. They're blown away by how tall he is, but they're also giving him gifts. So they give him, things to wear, like a red cape and like a red hat and stuff. He's loving it. They're getting along. Well, behind their backs, he's planning to murder them all.
I was wondering if he was going to bring him in and
set
him up and knock him down.
Their plan, this giant, he was a crafty giant. He was planning to bring all the Spanish into a dining hall and lock them in and slaughter them.
Wow.
Well,
did they eat them, Dr. Longo, or did they just slaughter them?
No cannibalism yet. We'll get to cannibal giants. Once we start looking at the bones, there's stories of cannibals because of how the bones were found, cracked for their marrow.
Suck the marrow out of them, yeah.
Well, the Spanish conquistadors, they get ambushed. Well, they kind of catch wind of it before the attack comes from Tascaloosa. They catch wind of it because they see people hiding weapons or something like that. But they have enough time to kind of prepare and to not get caught in this kill zone. But a battle ensues, and another testament of Tascaloosa's size is that he's able at one point to pick a Spaniard up by a limb and swing him like you see in the movies.
Wow. When
a giant picks someone up by the legs and ragdolls him. We have two eyewitness accounts, that he was able to ragdoll someone, Tascaloosa. And I think, we don't know for sure, but they say Tascaloosa died in that battle. But they weren't able to recover the body, I don't think. Because I think they were kind of in a rush to go.
Was he swinging the guy like a weapon? Was he wielding him like a weapon, or just...
No.
Okay.
No, but he hit him hard enough to where all of his teeth shot out of his mouth.
Oh.
So all of his teeth gone. Oh, actually, I might be confusing my details right there. I think it was Tazcalusa picked some guy up and he did ragdoll him. Okay, he didn't. I don't think he had a weapon on him. He just swung this guy around and killed him. Okay, but then I believe it was also Tazcalusa who got a swing in on Hernando de Soto himself, the leader of the Spanish expedition, and blew all his teeth out of his mouth. One hit, all of his teeth. And Hernando de Soto, the leader of this expedition, was in great need of a dentist by the end of this, and it may have contributed to his sudden demise from sickness somewhere near the Mississippi River. He died, and the expedition pretty much died with him.
Yeah, that was going to leave a mark for sure. Susie Q did a past life regression on someone and found the guy was a giant. Interesting.
Is that what the kids are calling it? Is that what the kids are calling it nowadays? Past life regression?
Oh, and Crystal wants to know, was there any midget tossing going on? Oh, so it was kind of like a midget toss a little bit. Dwarf tossing, whatever you call it.
A little bit. So Tazcalusa, this whole fight goes down. The Spanish make it out, but they're in rough shape. They don't make it too much further before De Soto dies, and they get on boats and they sail. They try and sail their way out back to safety in Spanish Mexico, which has already been settled a little bit by then.
Right.
And they know that there's cities that they can look for if they just trace the coast. So, but first they have to make it down the Mississippi River, and they bury Hernando de Soto in secrecy in the Mississippi River, because Hernando de Soto, like some of the other Spanish leaders, because he came bearing a cross and because the Indians were very superstitious, that when the Spanish would come, it was very often said that they brought good weather with them. And that was something that the Indians, put a lot of kind of faith into, right? Like, also the Spanish, they did some tricks here and there. A popular tactic was to use celestial events as a scare tactic or like a ploy to get Indians to submit or surrender before a battle. And they would wait for a eclipse or something like that. And when they knew an eclipse was coming, they would basically they would plan to go meet a lot of people, to go meet a lot of new groups for the first time. And they would say, if you don't hand over the keys to your village, if you guys don't drop your arms, we're going to take the sun away, or we're going to take the sun away. And we're going to do it for a half hour or a couple hours the first time. But if we have to come back and do it again, it'll never come back. So they would use a solar eclipse or an asteroid or, whatever they could plan ahead for.
Comet, anything they knew was coming.
And they would try and terrify a group of, more uncivilized Indians with it.
Dr. Longo, any indication that they were weather witching or employing any magical arts?
No, I don't. You're not going to like my honest take on it. My honest take on it is that these people did bring Christianity, and say what you want about Christianity, but it liberated them from human sacrifice. They were sacrificing animals and humans for good weather, and just stopping that alone, I think, will get you better weather, if that makes sense.
I could see that.
The heavens do respond to good faith.
Absolutely.
And wishing good weather and sacrificing for it is different than wishing good weather and bringing the cross and saying, well, that's my take on it, is that when Cabeza de Vaca went through there, they treated him like a saint because he brought good weather and he brought peace to all the nations. He taught them about, peace and things like that.
Interesting.
When Hernando de Soto, he was a warrior. He was a war fighter. I mean, they were annihilating people. Don't let the story misrepresent the conquistadors. They were good at killing people. They were good at, carving. They knew they were 6.5 foot tall men in those villages, and they still rushed headfirst into them. But Hernando de Soto, who still has this reputation as a killer, they even say he's he was especially cruel to the Indians and things like that. If he wanted the answer to a question and the Indians didn't give it to him, they'd sick the dogs on him, things like that.
Ooh.
Even he had a reputation as a weather bringer, for bringing good weather. And I think that was the Indians would put a stop to their religious practices kind of when the Spanish would come through. And I think, who knows, divine timing, good luck, a little bit of both. But I think
even if you don't believe in Christianity, if you're just a person that's of an esoteric bent, you could say that the elimination of that horrible energy would still bring about more positive energy, which, I would imagine would bring about better weather. I mean, everything's connected.
Mm-hmm.
So I think your point's valid.
And also, they were just very superstitious. They were each new tribe they found was just as shocked as the last to see people in armor and horses. And so anything good that would have happened probably would have been attributed to them, even if it wasn't actually them, but they did earn this reputation of working miracles or bringing good weather. So they leave Tascaloosa. Hernando de Soto dies. They bury him in the Mississippi River, but they still have to leave. They still have to make it back home. They abort the mission to settle La Florida. They just want to go home. There's only a couple hundred of them left. Cut in half, if not worse, their numbers were. So they make boats. They boil a lot, or they cook down a lot of their supplies into raw iron and just kind of try and craft boats out of all their supplies. Wood, they make nails out of their bullets. They make, fittings out of the barrels of their guns and the shields. They take all their stuff. They make enough metal and nails to build boats. These are pretty crafty guys. They make enough boats. I think they said 3 boats, maybe 5, but a handful of boats. They get on these boats. They go down the Mississippi. They're leaving. Okay. The danger is far from over. They're without a leader. Just De Soto, he was the man with the plan. He's dead. Just a bunch of guys, There's some officers, there's some people who have leadership positions, but morale is low, okay?
Right.
They're going to escape. They don't have the guns they had before.
They're just trying to get the hell out of Dodge.
At least they had the benefit of armor, helmets, loud guns, and cannons. A lot of that's gone now. They're just on the boats, going down the Mississippi, hightailing it. Well, there are Indians who try and stop them from leaving. And they had to hide the fact that De Soto died because the Indians thought De Soto had religious powers. So when De Soto dies, it's green light. The order to kill is out. Every tribe around wants them dead.
So why didn't they just weekend at burn him? Tie him to a mast and act like he was still alive?
They had, I don't know. They were too embedded with the Indians. You know
Gotcha.
what I mean? They had to bury him. Maybe for religious reasons, they had to bury him,
Gotcha.
Soon. But
somebody was thinking the same thing I was. So
yeah. So they get out of the Mississippi. They're going down the Mississippi, and there are Indians who are trying to stop them. Okay? They're pulling up boats alongside them. They're firing arrows. We don't hear anything too much about their height at that point. These
Right.
are probably just average-sized Indians now that they're with. Well, then they make it to the mouth of the Mississippi River. The people who were chasing them pulled off for some reason. It's almost like They don't want to meet what's at the mouth of the river. But the Spanish keep going down the river. They're like, oh, no one's firing arrows at us. Okay, we can relax a little bit. Then they get to like pretty much the exact mouth, the final kind of opening to the Mississippi, where the Mississippi pours out into the ocean. And there is somewhat of a blockade waiting for them of large canoes that kind of cut them off as they're coming close, made it look like they could, get past, and then come and cut them off. And they say in the closest of these canoes, they could make out the people. They said that based off the size of the canoes, based off the trees and everything they could see, right, that the chief, the leader, whoever's addressing them from this canoe, that he was also in the 9-foot ballpark.
Wow.
Not as tall as Tuscaloosa, but still really freaking big.
You got a super chat from Rock and Rolla there.
Rock and Rolla, $4.99. I would construct a wagon pulled by a team of well-trained, long-distance trotting alligators to traverse the Americas. Go look at the postcards of like St. Augustine in early 1920s Florida. You'll see some alligator carts.
Interesting. Can I tell you a quick alligator story?
Totes.
I grew up on Lake Seminole. I'm out there on a dock with a cane pole pulling brim out right, left and right. Mm-hmm. And it was in a little inlet, and it was about a 6-foot embankment that went up maybe 40 degrees, pretty steep. And I see this big Irish setter barking at this great big huge gator. And Dr. Longo, I swear to you, I'm sitting there watching it. And before that dog could back up, that gator was out of the water, had the dog, took him down under the water, and doggone. I mean, they are fast.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. They call them swamp dogs, swamp puppies.
For a reason.
And they can pop out. Yeah. If they want you, they'll get you.
They can actually come up on their back feet and run a little bit too. I've seen it.
They can run pretty fast if they want to. They
usually for 20, 30. I think it's either 20 or 30 yards. They can outrun a horse.
I've got a pretty cool video of a horse and an alligator in a fight.
Oh shit!
The horse wins.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tough horse. High magnitude tells us 30 miles an hour for short burst from an alligator.
Mm-hmm.
Jason says 35. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fast. Yeah. So these guys, they're making it out the Mississippi River in a boat. They get cut off by some canoes. In one of these canoes, probably all of them, but the closest one, they can see a very tall person. They're probably all tall, but they can tell this guy is tall. Not only that, he's jet black.
Whoa.
Black. We're not talking dark skin. We're talking black. Because they even go as far as to say he was blacker than an Ethiopian.
Holy crap. That's
to them meant black. Ethiopian, some said back then it kind of referred to all of all of Africa, or the African phenotype, right? So blacker than an Ethiopian. And again, they had black people on their voyage. A lot of those Spaniards were mixed race. The Moors had come through there. If you look at movies that try and cast people for this time period, Spanish conquistadors, yes, there's a lot of blonde people, but a lot of them are mixed race. They look like kind of the Americans of today. A lot of black, half, mulatto, mixed race people. So they had black people with them. You know what I mean? And they went as far as to say this Indian was darker than an African, blacker than an African, not body paint. The person who writes this down, also an Inca guy, he says he theorized that it was because of the dirtiness of the water at the mouth of the Mississippi River. So he theorized that it was because they either drink salt water or, they didn't get a good look at these people or their lifestyle. But he said maybe because these Indians bathe in such dirty water that they're black. But you didn't hear that here, folks. Okay.
Right.
Don't quote unquote me on that. But he theorizes, he had to kind of take a couple swings in this account at why they were so black, why they look so different from the other Indians. So he says it, very, very dark skin. They make it past that boat. They have a shootout with them, arrows and spears coming in and going out. But they make it past. They make it out. Not everyone makes it out alive. But they bust through the blockade, and now they're in the Gulf of Mexico. They end up most of them getting shipwrecked and washed up on the coast of Texas again, just like the last expedition. But they go, a couple of them make it through Texas too. Now, more of them survived than the last expedition. The last one was only about 4 people. This was more. This was maybe like a couple dozen people survived. Okay. So, but they made it to Mexico, and some of them wrote firsthand accounts of what they saw, what happened, how terrible it was. And that's where I'm getting this information. So we know how this got to us. We know who it was. And also the black guy who traveled around America. I remembered his name. I think his name was Esteban or Estevanico. The Moor. Estevanico. Let me check that.
Yeah, another super chat from Barney Boyle.
Cool. Yeah, that guy's name is Estevanico. Got any Daniel Boone lore? I'm descended from him. Not really, but I watched a lot of that growing up. Old, like 50s, 60s Daniel Boone stuff. TV show or movies, I don't remember. But
I heard he was a man. He was a big man.
Was he a tall guy?
There's just an old dirty song, so we won't go any deeper into that.
Oh. I'm out of the loop on that one.
Okay. Well, I'm a lot older than you, Dr. Longo, so.
I'm actually 88 years old.
Oh, okay. You look great for 88.
I've been drinking water, Florida water, Fountain of Youth water. I'm actually 420.
I saw that. Where did I see that? Was that on your channel? That guy, I think it was on your Twitter, the guy standing next to the Fountain of Youth. And it's got this sign on there that says, don't drink it. It's got bad chemicals or something like that.
It's radioactive.
Yeah, that was what it was.
Radium in the water. And it's mood enhancing. It has a little bit of lithium in there too, I think.
Interesting.
Really good stuff. I try and drink that a couple times a year. It's crazy. You feel so good after it. And it's like sulfur, it's very sulfury. Like I wouldn't drink that every day. But I believe in it. And they do try and warn people to not drink it. The city tried to have it taken away, but local support, locals who believe in it won, thank God. And we're able to keep it. Now there's a sign that tells you, we don't recommend you drink this, but it's still there for everyone to enjoy. The radium might be what contributed to the height of some of these people.
Interesting, yeah.
To be honest, there's a lot of accounts, or just today, evidence, studies. Where I'm not a big studies guy, but studies that show that radium increases the rate of growth of things. That could be a culprit for the size. But could I share?
Yeah, absolutely.
Am I able to share on screen?
Yeah, you just go down the bottom where it says present, and it'll pop up on my screen, and I'll give the A-OK. We're well over 600 now, and kind of an ironic twist. my great friends that told me about your show are going to be in town here with us on Thursday. So it all comes together, man.
Cool. Who's that?
Their name is Mike and Kim, and they are big fans of your show. And he's been telling me about you for probably 3 years. And I just finally watched you a couple weeks ago, and here we are, man.
Cool.
One of my big problems is I spend so much time making my own content that I don't really get to look at other people's too much. So it's one of my weaknesses.
Dude, I know what that's like. I know how that can be. I get it. So we're talking Mississippi River, big, tall, black giant. They say that his voice was fitting to his height, like an octave lower. He had a grotesque voice, this black Indian. And who knows? Maybe this was a long-lost African shipwreck, African guy on a raft. Maybe it was an African empire. Maybe it was, who knows? I don't know how this guy got here. I'm not saying that's evidence of any we was Kang stuff, but this guy was a Kang. This guy was in charge. He was large and in charge.
Gotcha.
It's also worth noting that if you look at the blackest parts of America, if you look at the darkest skin in America, it is pretty much to this day the mouth of the Mississippi River.
Yep.
So
Mississippi, that's what I was thinking.
The blackest people are right there. You'd expect it to be around Charleston, where the most of the slave trade was coming in. But also New Orleans was big on that too, but New Orleans was largely French. Okay. But still, there was a black person there. I'm not saying African. He had dark skin, black skin, whatever. Well, where else can we go with this? That was 1538, 1539. The De Soto expedition failed. They're Spanish. They get out of there. Now let's shift gears to the French. The Huguenots, who were persecuted, whatever you want to say, in Europe. They're some of the earliest people to try and settle Florida too. They start a fort/settlement/colony at Charleston, near Jacksonville, and one near St. Augustine. Okay. And the Huguenots they're going around meeting the Indians, and those are the Timucua Indians. The Timucua Indians were tall. We're talking over 6 foot average for the men.
Wow.
And even the national parks, even the state parks will admit, yes, some of them were 6.5 feet tall. Yes, we have 6.5 foot tall bones all over the place. Okay, so what? That's what they say. Well, the average Timucuans were tall, but then you hear what the French had to say about their chiefs.
Ooh.
The French spent a little time with them. They saw their customs. They went to war alongside them. They some of them probably married some of the women a little bit, or they spent time with a lot of different tribes around North Florida. So, what did they have to say? Number one, they said that some of the chiefs were of extreme height. That a couple of these guys, one guy named Saturiwa, also pretty cool, is that a lot of the chief names here sound awfully like Greco-Roman or Eurasian.
Right.
Saturiwa. Some people said it was Saturina. Saturn. Saturn. And then guess what his son was? Athor.
Ah.
That's either Thor or Hathor,
Yep.
Scandinavian or Egyptian. And that makes sense because Saturn was the god of Jupiter, who is Thor, who is a lot of other great heroes. King Arthur, too, is also Jupiter, the planet Jupiter. And, Jesus, too, you can work in there, too. Jesus is Jupiter, the New Testament god of the Old Testament is Saturn, the bad guy. Saturn, his son is Jupiter. So Saturiwa and his son Athor. So maybe they shared a mythology with some cousins across the Atlantic. Who knows? But
it's almost like somebody came and told them about that.
Maybe. We have a lot of other Greek or Greco-Roman kind of linguistic influence in the Southeast United States. The Creek Indians, for example, I've gone as far as to say, and I'm not the first person to say it, Creek equals Greek.
Ah.
The Creek didn't call themselves Greek. The Europeans started calling them Greek. Every Indian lives near a creek. All Indians have creeks. We didn't call them, and creek territories, thousands of miles, across, like, it's the whole territory is filled with creeks. I don't think that. I think phonetically, Creek and Greek are the same. You have places like Apala, Appalachia, Apalachicola, Apollo.
Yeah.
Apala, Apollo. You have Oki, meaning water or ocean in the Indian languages. Oki, that's where we get ocean, from Okeanos. There's words like Maya, which is Hebrew and Greek. Mm-hmm. There's words like, what else? Palatka is a Florida word. Palatka means crossing or bridge in native Floridian. It means sidewalk or boardwalk in Greek.
Interesting.
Palatka. What are the odds of this? So
there aren't.
You can just go down, and any word that kind of doesn't have a meaning in English, you can play with and compare it to Greek or Hebrew in Florida, and you'll be shocked at how many come up with the same meanings,
And even the physical characteristics between Greeks and Indians, very similar.
Yeah, the Greek nose is a little bit like the Indian nose. And there were
dark eyes, dark skin.
We were talking, I think last time we talked a little bit about some of the chiefs, and I think you brought up there was this one guy named Roman Nose or Hook Nose.
Yeah.
Some of the chiefs were known for their either Grecian, Roman, or even Jewish style noses,
right,
that seemingly didn't come across the Bering Strait.
Well, Sitting Bull had, I know, is very much like that.
Yeah, they had multiple chiefs. There was a chief known as Roman Nose. They just called him Roman Nose, and then there was multiple chiefs known as Hook Nose.
Yeah,
but so we're looking at the Timucua Indians. There's Saturiwa and his son Athor. Saturiwa, he's a Timucua chief. They had their hair up in like a bun, and the Timucua did a little bit of what we'd call cranial deformation,
mm-hmm.
or even what's it called? Again, not everybody was born not everyone was shaped like that. Maybe someone was, I think there was an original race of people who had this unusual head shape that kind of inspired the cranial deformation.
And they would wrap their skulls, form them.
Yeah, but today we call it cranial deformation, which implies that it's artificial or man-made, but still, I'm not discounting natural head shapes, weird, unusual head shapes, different races or species that had tall heads, double-lobed heads, things like that. So the Timucua, they did a little bit of this cranial deformation. So that contributed to their height too. Not only were they tall people, but their foreheads were almost twice as tall as the average person. And the way that they tied their hair up and the amount of feathers that they used in their hair all made them look a little bit taller too. That that thing, that being understood, the French went as far as to say the tallest of their men, or no, sorry, just their chiefs they were 1.5 feet taller than their tallest man.
Wow.
And the French tallest man was about 6'3". So you add 1.5 feet to 6'3". You're left with close to 8 feet. 1.5 feet. Some people say half a yard, but a half a yard's 1.5 feet.
Yeah.
Right? 1.5 feet taller than their tallest man. Not only that, they asked the chiefs, you guys eat really well, really healthy, They were having a meal together. And the Indians tell them, yeah, we live for 300 years.
Holy crap.
I'm 300 years old. My dad is 350 years old. And they were drinking Florida water, And the Spanish said they look like they're 300 years old, I've seen a 100-year-old man. This guy looks 300. Like, yes, he's healthy and tall and he can walk around, but there's certain things about him that you can tell look 300 years old.
Wow.
That these are almost immortal people. They are tall. If they didn't die in combat, they almost didn't die,
What do we know about their diet?
No cows, that's for sure.
Yeah.
No cow, no pig, no chicken, no lamb, no goat. They had turkey, they had deer, but they were mainly eating corn. They're mainly eating fruit, corn, squash, berries. Just like today, they largely made like meals and crackers, and they would grind things up into powder and make cereals and breads and things like that.
Well, let me throw a conspiracy theory at you. So we know that maize has been highly GMOized. You could say it's actually been attacked. Could we maybe tie it back to that?
Yes, because the DeSoto expedition that I was telling you about, they land with 800 guys. They had about 100 cavalry, 100 guys on horseback that were meant to go long distances ahead of the rest of the guys. They could go out on their own and take care of themselves. They were limited to how far they could go. They could go on their horses with guns and lances. Nothing could stop them. Not even a 7 or 8 foot giant, right? Yeah. It's everything else that had to move slowly that made them so weak. Gotcha. The people carrying the chests and the supplies, and if they got ambushed, it was like a slaughter. So they would try and get the cavalry out of head, and they could lance people left and right. And the giant or not, you couldn't do anything, right? And then if they'd shoot a cannon, that would kind of get them back. For shit, what did you ask? I kind of forgot.
What was their diet? Was there missing? You says did they eat fish?
Corn. Yes, now Northeast Florida, they're not going to be eating as much fish as the people in more South Florida, but they did fish. The Timucua certainly fished, but it's still cold at night. It's still like it's not Florida. When people think of Florida, the tropics and fishing, St. Augustine and north of there, yes, you have some palm trees, but it's really not your. They were more forest dwelling. They were a little bit more. They made fires. They did eat shellfish. They did eat a lot of fish, but gotcha. They would hunt, and the bulk of their diet would be corn, squash, things like that. And we know this because the Spanish and French had big feasts with them. But the corn, I'm bringing up the cavalry and the horses because the Spanish were the weakness, their limiting factor was what they could feed the horses. So they could go out, 10 miles, 100 miles ahead of all the rest of the guys and clear out the way. And, most of those Indians had never seen a horse before. So if they see 100 of them, and by the way, when you throw a spear off a horse, it's going like 500 miles an hour, not really, but it's like
much faster than throwing it not on a horse.
If you're shooting an arrow or throwing a spear off a horse, it's like kind of throwing something out of a car. The speed of the car added to the speed of the throw. Mm-hmm. So this was
shooting arrows off of horses back then? Mostly
throwing spear. Okay. The Spanish would. I'm sure some of them were good archers on horseback, but they were throwing lances, like poles, long pole arms off their horses. And that was the most success they had against Indians was doing that.
Interesting.
Charging with their horses. But they could only feed them so much, and they could only go as far as the food they had they could only go as far as the food that they had to feed them on the way back,
Right.
And what they would start off with was oats. What they'd start off with was flour. They'd make flour cakes, or they'd feed them oats, the horses, right? Well, and they'd feed them acorns too. They found acorns all over the United States, so they'd use acorns to feed their horses. Well, guess what? When they started running out of food and they couldn't find acorns, they would give them Indian corn, the maize that the Indians had. It wasn't the same as the corn we have today, but it was pretty dang close. It was, sweet, sweetish. You could eat it raw if you wanted, but you could cook it, make it some good stuff. Mm-hmm. They'd powder it down, whatever. When they fed that to the horses, they swore, and they wrote this down, that those horses would go twice as far on half as much.
Interesting.
That the original corn that they were eating when the Spanish showed up was like a superfood.
Interesting.
That corn juice was like the number one thing that they were drinking, like a corn beverage was what all the guys were drinking. And that if they fed the corn to the horses, it's the best performance they ever got out of their horses. And I believe them, even today. Say what you want about the GMO corn. Say what you want. Oh, they spray. Oh, it's this bad. Oh, it's got too much sugar. You ever seen a corn-fed, NFL player? We say corn-fed in America for a reason.
Right.
If someone's corn-fed, you're saying that's almost like holds a higher, larger connotation than milk raised or a dairy farmer. If someone says like, "Oh, I grew up on a dairy farm," you kind of say, "Okay, they're going to be burly, going to be big, tall, strong." But if you say someone's corn-fed, a corn farmer, and they're eating corn all day, we say that's a big person. Corn-fed corn-fed comes above steak and dairy farmer even.
What was the grain that the Mayans and the Aztecs would give to royalty and pregnant women? I'm blanking on it right now. Cynthia, if you're listening, tell me what that is. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a grain, but I know that they did.
You'll know what it is when I remember the word.
They did a lot of cacao. That was like reserved for the royalty.
Gotcha.
Largely cacao. So the corn was very nutritious, and it was almost like an energy booster too, and the horses loved it. So that was part of their diet. Well, now we're getting to the Huguenots. They said, "Oh yeah, this guy's 9 feet tall, or he's 8 feet tall."
Quinoa is what I was thinking of.
Quinoa. Mm-hmm. That's good stuff too. I think it was the water. I think the water is the main culprit. We got to speed along here. I know you went for 20 minutes or so before I got on, and I'm sorry for being late.
That's all right.
But
roll on, brother.
Do you want us to go until 220, or do you want us just for?
Yeah, we can go 220.
Okay, cool. I don't want to rush the last bit of too much, but that's pretty much all the firsthand eyewitness accounts. Okay, is the early accounts of really, really tall people. The Huguenots came, so we started out with Spanish accounts. Now we're talking French accounts. That's corroborative. You know what I mean? The Spanish are giving us an account. The French are giving us an account. The Inca are giving us an account. I'm not going to stick my nose up at that. I'm not going to say these guys, these full-grown warriors had, with enough dignity and honor to go fight overseas, and these guys are just making it up. These guys don't know what they're talking about. They're too romantic. They're romanticizing their. I'm not buying it. I think those guys saw above average people. And we're not just talking 6.5 feet. We're talking really tall. And I think they wrote that down because it mattered. And that's what they saw.
I agree.
Well, let's corroborate this more. Those are the firsthand accounts. And now let's just kind of say, okay, well, where did those people go? Where's the evidence of that? Would kind of be the next logical question. If someone's hearing this for the first time, okay, yeah, the stories are cool, but where's the evidence? Show me a bone. I need to see a skeleton, right? You can say this person's tall, but show me a bone, right? Show me a bone, right? So we've got to. Give me one sec here. I'm going to try and pull up a video here of a video. Let's see if we can do this.
Just hit the present down there at the bottom in the middle. There you go. And there it is.
Okay, cool. Let's keep that. Can you pull that down?
What do you mean?
Oh, here. I just wanted to make sure it works.
Okay.
Let's get to.
Now there's a little button there that says you have to click the box if you wanted the sound to come through.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll notice it.
Cool. Thank you. I'll try and do that. But I want to set the stage here because we've got video evidence.
This is going to be good stuff, folks.
Of a real giant bone being handled by a real Florida academic. But first, we got to set the stage for what happened to the bones. There's these stories of all these people. Where's the evidence?
Right.
Well, there's abundant evidence. And just as hard as they fought to kind of delegitimize the accounts of these giants, they, with a capital T,
yes,
fought just as hard to get rid of the accounts or to delegitimize the accounts. Sorry, the findings, the archaeological findings that affirmed those accounts. Okay. So we're talking about the 1500s and Spanish and French early colonization. Now let's skip forward to 1880s, 1890s, 1910s, 1920s, turn of the century, Victorian era, whatever you want to call it. Now Florida is getting settled by English speakers. Florida is becoming what we know it today.
Right.
It's getting cleared out. Everything up until then, they were just kind of working around the port cities. Didn't really have a huge foothold. Now, Florida's getting tamed and cut. The wilderness is getting cut back. Okay. And what are they seeing? More and more Indian mounds. And as they're developing, as they're laying roads, more and more building these big resorts and hotels, they are uncovering Indian mounds.
Yep.
Burial sites, burial mounds, temple mounds, pyramids even.
Yep.
They're finding things like that. And they're digging in. This is also what were the Mormons into? Grave digging, mound digging. They were largely constructing their mythology, their story out of what they found in these mounds. And I'm trying to piece the pieces together. I do think the Mormons found things that they believed to be Hebrew or Egyptian. And I think that at worst, what we can say about the Mormons is they were just trying to make sense of the things they were finding in the ground in the Northeast United States. Did they build some wacky religion out of it? All these beliefs got piled onto? Yes, but I think there was a genuine discovery of things that had Hebrew writing, Egyptian writing, hieroglyphics, whatever you want to call them.
You know what?
And guess what? The Micmac will be the first to tell you this. Certain
I'll
tribes.
bet you, Dr. Longo. And I've done a lot of studying on Mormonism. I think it was very pure, quote unquote, while it was Joseph Smith. When
Right.
Brigham Young took over, things got a little sideways. But it just came to me that, Joseph Smith put the golden plates and he'd put his hat over his head and he would look in and see it. And there was these symbols. I bet those symbols were Hebrew.
Yeah. And that's what they tell us is they say it's a reformed Egyptian or reformed. It was Hebrew, but with a lot of like pictographic or hieroglyphic kind of influence. And that's exactly what the Micmac tribe, to this day, the Micmac who are up there close to where the Mormons were starting off, they have an Egyptian hieroglyphic language.
Interesting.
That matches up. This is not even a conspiracy theory. The Micmac are the most kind of literate, some of the most literate Native Americans. They had a written language to start off with. They have good storytelling. And if Old World Micmac is in here, he's a legendary commenter, longtime supporter. Old World Micmac, not here tonight, doesn't look like, but he drops total truth bombs. The Micmac, number one, they're linked to the Celtic, early Celtic seafarers. Micmac.
Yeah.
And then they say that the Templars came there. They say that the Basque came there. Basque whalers came there. They say that the Finns came there, or some, Scandinavian people came through there. They have all this written down, recorded. So when the Mormons say, oh yeah, there was Egyptian being written down, or what they think was Egyptian being written down, they're pretty much just talking about the Micmac language. And the Micmac
written on golden plates, Dr. Longo?
They had copper.
Oh, okay.
Copper can be mixed with gold. And even today, things that are copper are said to be gold because nobody can really prove how much golden it is.
And if you're writing a story, it sounds a lot better to say the plates were gold than copper.
And even in Florida to this day, the other way around, there are things that are said to be copper that are actually gold because they don't want people stealing them.
Yes.
So this could be like the other way around but Bok Tower, for example, the door is gold or brass or bronze. Sorry, copper, brass, or bronze, but it looks gold.
Yeah.
When the sun is shining, that thing looks gold. There's a ship.
What were the doors of the temple allegedly in Jerusalem?
Could have been gold. Certainly could have been.
Interesting.
Then there's a shipwreck off the coast of the Carolinas that they say it's officially classified. It's officially registered shipwreck as copper ore vessel.
Interesting.
Copper ore vessel. Well, I've interviewed 2 divers who dove on this ship off the coast of the Carolinas. They say that it's gold ore, that there's gold ore in a shipwreck, but they have to call it copper because they don't want people stealing it.
Wow.
Digging for it, diving down. So that happens, But the other way around with the Mormon thing, kind of, who knows?
Very interesting.
I'm very open-minded to the Mormon story. The proof is in the pudding, and by their fruit you shall know them. And the Mormons, to me, have good energy. They love
We got a
family.
great subscriber named John from Tulsa, and he was a longtime Mormon.
I love Mormons. Every Mormon I've ever met has impressed me. I'm not just making that up. I'm not a Mormon, no affiliation, but I'm listening. I'm paying attention to what they got going on.
Just don't take one Mormon with you if you go fishing.
Take all 3 of your Mormon wives.
Well, at least take 2 of them, because if you only take one, you'll drink all the beer.
Well, I like the Mormons. I like their history. It's interesting. It's America's, it's kind of like America's original, or America's first great originally American religion.
It is.
It's America's greatest religious movement.
And Mormon girls are hot.
They usually are. They're usually fit. You don't see a lot of fat Mormons either. They love to.
That's a really good point. Yes,
They don't drink.
Thor wants to shout out Donnie and Marie.
They don't drink. They have an emphasis on vegetarianism.
Do they? I did not know that.
Yeah, it's recommended to eat as little flesh as possible in Mormonism. There's a lot of things that I kind of like about them, but who knows? So, what were we talking about? Okay, so the bones,
right.
Burial mounds.
And you got a video. Don't forget that.
I've got a video up too. When Florida's getting developed, they're finding all these Indian mounds. They're digging into these Indian mounds, much like the Mormons were. They're finding interesting artifacts. They're finding a lot of bones. It becomes such a kind of pastime, hobby in Florida, that people would go out and do this for fun, just like the Mormons. There's all these mounds all over the place. Oftentimes, it was the only elevation in the area. It was easy to determine, easy to see where they were. So people start digging into the mounds. What do they find? Very, very often, they're finding bones of unusually tall people. Now we're talking about American history, like United States history. The English-speaking Americans who are moving into Florida, they're finding bones all over the place, especially in the mounds, and they're unusually large, extraordinary. They're pulling them out. They're putting them in museums. They're taking pictures of them. They're writing articles about them. Hundreds, if not thousands, of articles just out of Florida describing the bones that were pulled out of these Indian mounds. So I've got a lot of pictures of these articles. We can flip through some together here just for people to get an idea. Thank you, Jeff. Oh, shit.
Absolutely.
Fuck. Okay, boom.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good...
I've been there.
Nice. That's by the hospital in St. Petersburg.
Yep.
Pretty much downtown.
Yep. St. Anthony's, I believe it is.
This is what your average Indian mound would look like in Florida. Roughly pyramid shaped. Mm-hmm. There might be a couple levels to it, like the staircase there indicates, but roughly pyramidal shaped, made out of sand. Could be all shell. Yep. Could be like an aggregate, almost like a concrete type thing that they could mix together. But they would layer the dirt and the earth so that they would be very preservative to the bones that they put in. And in fact, this was so well thought out. They're mostly shellfish is the bulk of these Indian mounds, especially in Florida. Now, what happens when you put all this shell together and you bury bones in shell, it rains.
Yeah.
It rains and it washes through the shells, and it strips the lime and the calcite and these minerals out of the shell down into the bones, and voila, they get preserved.
Yep.
It's not preservation like you have in the water, where there can be flesh and organic matter still on it. This is more of like a mineralization, like a fossilization kind of. So when the bones go into these mounds, they get really, really well preserved. Not as well preserved as some of the bog bodies, which we'll also talk about because that's where the video comes from. But this is your typical Florida Indian mound, right? That's a postcards from Florida. So these used to be all over the postcards.
Daisy Freedom Fighter remarks that there's amazing magical imagery around those mounds, and I would concur with that. Or just good energy.
Yes. Now here is Timucua, the skull of a Timucua Indian, or the ancestor of a Timucua Indian.
Wow.
So number one, their teeth are very large.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that you find in most of the Florida Indians, whether they're tall or not. Their teeth were exceptionally large, fat. But also you see the cranial deformation here, the egg shape to the head. You see how tall the head goes. That's not just because it got cracked. That's a long-headed individual. We also see some scenes like this. We've got sorry, I got a lot of sick here.
That's all right.
This is the type of stuff they're pulling out of the Indian mounds.
Holy crap.
The person on the right, I'm fairly certain, is an adult. If that's true, the person on the left is extraordinarily tall.
Hell yeah.
Extraordinarily tall. And this is the same site where you see what I mean? That bone,
Yes.
that skull belonged to one of these people or one of their friends or family. These are on the same site. And I believe that's Amelia Island.
Amelia Island, yep.
Real bones found near Amelia Island. This is just the 1980s, so we get good colored pictures of them. But if we go back to some old articles, they're going to look something like this. Old newspapers, the same newspapers people rely on today. This is not National Enquirer stuff. This one right here is the Tampa Tribune. That's still up and running today. You know.
Well, they merged with the St. Pete Times, so now it's called the Tampa Bay Times. So the Tribune's actually gone. Technically, they bought it.
Right.
It's my hometown. That's the only reason I know. I'm not trying to correct you.
No, you're right. But I'm subscribed to the, I believe. Yeah, whatever. I mean, you could be. I think you're right. But the Tampa Morning Tribune became the Tampa Tribune. Maybe the Tampa Tribune is the Tampa Bay Times today. I don't know the history on that, but I know that I am subscribed to a Tampa Bay newspaper.
Yeah. There's only one now. Yeah. It's called the Tampa Bay Times.
So Tampa Bay Times, but still Tampa Bay Times. This is still, the same entity. So
yeah, absolutely. 100% correct. Yeah. It's just been a consolidation.
Right. Now, we're going to look at this article here. This is your typical Florida giant bone article. Skeletal remains of Florida giant is discovered.
Nice.
The date on this one is February 14th. No, sorry. February 14th, 1925.
Wow.
And this one says something like 9 feet tall or so.
Holy crap.
1/4 larger than normal modern skulls. Very large skull.
That's big.
And then, again, another article about the same findings. But
Do you know anything about the thickness of the skulls? Were they thicker?
Yes. So just to get, I want to give you guys an impression of how many of these articles there were. We can go to Cedar Keys. See again. Big mound yields giant skeleton.
Amazing.
The skeleton measured over 9 feet in length, and the jaws were large enough to take in those of an ordinary person.
Holy crap.
Tons of oyster shells, I think they meant to say,
Yeah.
had to be removed before the skeleton was unearthed. So you asked about the thickness. I want to show you as many of these as I can, but regardless, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of articles written about findings like this from all over Florida. Every major city, too. Well, the Smithsonian was created, of course, largely for reasons like this, to like control the narrative and to get everyone on the same page. The Smithsonian, I think most of us have heard stories about the Smithsonian covering up findings, covering up the giants, right?
Absolutely.
It's kind of like a trope in the conspiracy theory community at this point. Like, blame it on the Smithsonian, you know? Well, guess what, guys? We have hardcore evidence of the Smithsonian destroying, losing, mishandling bones from Florida.
Amazing.
It's not a conspiracy theory. We have good evidence of it. Not evidence, it's an acknowledged fact. And I'll bring your attention to two of these, especially. Number one, I think in one of the first ones that we were just looking at here, I think they say Smithsonian here. Yeah, look at this.
We're pushing 700 right now, too.
Cool. Skull of giant starts theory of Florida race. Portions of large skeleton found by road graders near Boca Grande. You know, these aren't like hobbyists like looking for giant skeletons. They're just building a road. They found their stuff. Okay. The specimens are being prepared for shipment to the Smithsonian Institution, which has already dispatched one unsuccessful expedition to Florida to evacuate shell mounds on the West Coast in search of proof of the giant race theory. Wow. Shipment to the Smithsonian. I've got many articles that say the same thing.
Yep.
So we're not just picking a punching bag and saying, oh, the Smithsonian must have done it. This is the people who found these bones saying, we're sending them to the Smithsonian. We hope we hear some good stuff back. They never heard back. They never hear back. They always destroy the bones or lose them. Now, there's another thing called the Vero Man.
Vero Man, yes. This is good stuff.
Vero Man, we don't know if it was a giant, but this is where Vero Man was discovered. Okay, on the banks of a river in Vero, Florida.
Yep.
They also find mammoth and mastodon all over the place. Here's a picture of Vero Man. Might have been a woman, but they call it Vero Man. So, hang on.
You've done your research, sir.
Vero fossils indicate man lived in America some 150,000 years ago. The state geologist of Florida.
Yep.
This guy, I think his name was Sellards. Look at this. The state geologist of Florida. Archaeology was not as big of a field as it was then, so geologists would largely, they would kind of do archaeologists' work back then too. The state geologist of Florida said that the Vero Man was over 100,000 years old because of the strata he was in. and because of the animals that he was found next to.
Yep.
If these animals went extinct 10,000 years ago, and you've got a guy right next to it, he has to be older than 10,000 years. If he's next to animals that are, from the early Pleistocene, you're talking 100,000 years old. I mean, that's basic archaeology. They don't have to worry about carbon dating or anything like that. It's
and 12 feet tall.
Again, I'm not going to say that I can prove that or that's that is definitely taller than what I hear from reliable accounts, but they're saying 12 feet tall. There's some rumors going around.
Yeah.
What's important?
These state geologists aren't really known for hyperbole either. They're pretty conservative typically. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Now he says,
did they find any Jolly Green Giants? Is there any record of that?
I don't think so. But he said, what's important to me is the age on this one.
Right.
100,000 years old. Wow. Well, this guy, the state geologist of Florida, he goes into a head-to-head war with a guy named Ales Hardlicka. Hardlicka. Likes licking hard ones, I guess. I don't know. But Ales Hardlicka, that's his name is very weird. Go look it up, guys. Okay. Make fun of him.
Maybe he was just a drunk. Hard liquor.
He's the first curator of anthropology for the Smithsonian.
Ah.
They created his job. They hired him not just to dispel the human giant myth, but they hired him to directly combat the findings coming out of Florida. So half this guy's career was spent in Florida or disproving findings from Florida, because Florida was pretty much like the hotbed forefront of archaeology back then because of all the mounds and things like that. It was settled. The Midwest and West America, Florida was settled before most of that stuff. So they're finding mounds earlier. They're discovering these things. The state geologist says tall, 100,000 years old. The Smithsonian comes in and says, no. This guy's 5,000 years old at most. We're going with the Bering Strait theory. He was normal size. And guess what? We sent the bones. Florida was nice enough to send the bones to the Smithsonian. They lost them.
Amazing.
This is one of the most significant finds in American history. And they lost the bones. Right there on screen. And because the original Vero Man bones have been lost, he said, with reports placing them at FSU, the University of Florida, and the Smithsonian Institution, the scientists need new bones for radiocarbon dating that wasn't available in 1915. Guess what else? Oh, early Pleistocene. Look at this. They could have been 2 million years old. And again, these numbers are all over the place. You can say all these numbers are made up. But as far as what old is, as far as what we know old is, these are older than that. What else? Let me see what other proof we have here. Incidentally, this is another article. Incidentally, all the human remains from the Vero Beach fossil site were lost. And after their discovery, the specimens were shuttled back and forth between the Smithsonian Institution and Florida State. But by 1947, interested parties lost all track of them. What a shame.
Is this person trolling, or did the circus actually get a hold of some of them?
I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know. I know a little bit on the circus and their potential role in covering up Native American elephants.
Yes.
Elephants in the Americas, but the circus is evil, largely run by international hyenas of a certain faith.
And also pretty much based out of Sarasota-ish.
Yes, exactly. And all of the Ringling brothers were master masons.
Amazing.
And who started the ring? Who started the tent city tradition? Masons who would have their meetings, their secret festivals outside of town in tents, private tents that
And
look
I
just like
happened to be a Pentecostal evangelist for 20 years, and I had me a big old tent, baby. We had some fun under it.
Yep. So they try and disprove the Vero man. They try and do all this stuff, but we know. But other people say, but here's what someone else says. This is a different archaeologist. It's taken more than 100 years, but we now know that Sellards was right. The Smithsonian was trying to cover him up. And they cut his timeline, down by 20 times or so. But even today, even to this day, they concede that he was closer to the truth, and they doubled the timeline that was given by the Smithsonian. So now we're at like 14,000 years old. I'll take it. One of the oldest in the entire Southeast United States. I'll take it. The Smithsonian lost those bones. So they gaslight people and say, oh, that's a big conspiracy. The Smithsonian never did anything. That's gaslighting.
Yeah.
Now, also,
Randall Carlson talks about 4 species of elephants there.
Yeah, in the Americas, there was mammoth, mastodon, and there was a couple types of elephant type animals that some of them had 4 tusks instead of 2.
Interesting.
We have those in Florida. And Florida to this day has 90% of all the elephants in both of the Americas live in Florida.
Yeah. Elephants and horses.
Yes, and that's why Florida was Atlantis.
Absolutely.
Because you have to look for a place that meets the size, the parameters for Atlantis, and a place that has horse and elephant side by side. You don't find that in most of the Mediterranean 11,600 years ago. It had to be Florida, I believe. Let's watch this clip a little bit.
Did you click the box for sound?
No, I'm going to drag it over to a Gmail tab.
Okay.
I think this will work. Could you reshare or put this up?
Well, you'll have to request it again for it to pop up. Here it comes. Bam. Whoops. Yeah, there we go.
Can we hear this one? Tell me if you hear this.
Post-cranial?
Yes.
Cool. That's just so you know, that works for me. If you can't get the audio out, you drag a video and put it in a Chrome tab, and the audio always comes out perfect.
And by the way, this guy looks like a Mormon missionary, so
he does kind of look Mormon.
Elder Johnson. Anyway,
this is a doctor at Florida State University. His name is Dr. Jeffrey Thomas. He's like anthropology and archaeology. So he works with bones. This guy knows what he's talking about. And guess what? And we can kind of wrap it up on this. This is
okay.
Unless anything else you want to ask about, but the Florida academics, they haven't forgotten about the Vero man. They haven't forgotten about all those lost bones and all the gaslighting. Because Florida was actually in the trenches of that war between the Smithsonian and the local archaeologists and local geologists, anthropologists. Florida kind of lost more blood in that battle than anyone else, than any other state. So Florida kind of remembers. The Florida experts kind of remember and actually distrust the Smithsonian a little bit more than other states in America.
Yep.
Case in point, this bone right here that we're going to show you guys. And this is a video from a doctor in Florida, works at FSU. This bone didn't get sent to the Smithsonian. This one's staying right here, okay? They're not going to make the same mistake of giving giant bones over to The Smithsonian. And again, maybe the Floridian experts are also invested in covering up giants, but whatever. I'll take it. I'll take this one because this is at least what they're willing to show us. So maybe we can take this bone and say, well, if this is what they're willing to show us, they have even larger somewhere else.
I would say that's fair.
Nonetheless, let's go ahead with this. The video speaks for itself.
So all of the Wendover postcrania is kind of housed in these cabinets, and the crania is just around the corner. So just to kind of show you some of the ideas about the preservation, right? This is one of the males, adult males, that's absolutely massive. These individuals were very large, and preservation is just so immaculate that it's hard to believe that these are 8,000 years old. Wow. We've had researchers come in here and say, "Are you sure that they're this old? They really could be a lot younger." So even just compared to me, right, in terms of a hip placement, my knee is up here, and I'm 5'11". So these are really large individuals, right? And we have some with very unique traits to me, right? In terms of a hip placement, my knee is up here, and I'm 5'11".
So if you look right there, it's kind of hard to see with the play bar, but his feet are on the ground right there. You can pretty much, you can see where his pant leg ends. And he's got the upper joint of that femur right where his hip locks in. And he knows what he's talking about. You can even see he checked where his hip bone.
So even just compared to
sticking out,
right? In terms of the hip placement, my knee is up here.
And he points to you where his kneecap is.
700.
That's a tall bone. That's a tall person.
And he just sticks it in a drawer, man. Put that thing wrap it up in something.
Yeah. Yep. And you can see when it goes.
And I'm 5'11".
When he's standing right there, I mean, that thing's 2/3 of his leg.
Yeah.
And he's standing straight up. He says he's 5'11". I've asked 2 laborers that I know, handymen, craftsmen, laborers, a carpenter, and a general kind of handyman that I know well, who are like kind of old style. Like they can, if you show them a piece of wood, they can tell you how long it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've shown 2 guys that I really trust. Actually 3, but 2 people in person that I know. I've shown them a video of this bone and said, just give me a number of inches. How many inches do you think that bone is? They both said 25 inches. 25 inches from top to bottom. Okay. You want to know how tall an average person's femur is?
Yes.
A tall man, you and I, our femur would be about 19.5 inches.
Wow.
20 if we're especially long-legged. For a average, above average sized man. That bone is tall. Even if it's only 23 inches, even if it's only 22 inches, you're still talking 3 inches taller than a 6-foot man, a 5'11" man.
And we all know how important 3 inches can be.
I would wager that bone belongs to someone taller than Shaquille O'Neal.
Absolutely.
Because even Shaquille O'Neal's femur wouldn't stand out that much.
I was thinking 8 feet.
But these are the type of bones people were finding. And we know damn well that's not the tallest there's ever been. You know, if that's sitting in FSU and it survived all the cover-up and such. But okay, that's really it. We've got first-hand accounts. We've got the stories of the Indian mounds. First-hand accounts from multiple groups of people, tall Indians. We've got the stories and the articles about what they're finding in the Indian mounds. We've got proof of a Smithsonian cover-up, or at least Smithsonian negligence. And we've got pictures, videos of abnormally tall bones today. The last little part that I'd want to put in this that I'd like to include is the height of native Floridians today, the Florida Indians. And so if we could just flip through a couple pictures, that'll be the end of it.
Killing me. It's awesome.
Um,
We've got estimates on other body parts going on in the chat, so you have to extrapolate. It's science, Dr. Longo.
yeah.
Wow. Check
that's
that
a
out.
mammoth. That's a mammoth. That's a mammoth.
That's pretty damn big.
Yeah. That's a mammoth. But here, I want to show you some of the Indians who are tall. Here we go. Okay.
Wow.
So the only missing piece to this would be we've got bones, we've got stories of tall Indians. What about the living, breathing Indians? You know, can we bridge the gap here?
Yeah.
Well, at the time that the camera was introduced, or at the time that photographs first started being taken of Native Americans, Seminole Indians were the tallest people on Earth.
Interesting.
I'm going to go as far as to make that claim. Nobody else has really been paying attention. Nobody cared enough to crown them with that honor. But I've gone through, I've looked at I've found as many of their recorded heights as I could. I've compared it to with how many Florida Indians there are in total. Only like 5,000 at most, you know, or 3,000 Seminole Indians. If you do the math on that, and they have so many over 6 foot tall men, you're confronted with the fact that they are the tallest people in the world.
Absolutely.
Now, to this day, like right now, they might not reflect that. They're largely on the American diet. They're eating what everyone else is eating. They're driving cars. They're not going around barefoot like they used to. But even to this day, Seminole Indians average over 6 feet.
I did not know that.
Whereas the Plains Indians, who were also said to be over 6 feet at one point, and are remembered as the tallest people on Earth at one point in time, they average like 5'8" today. So the Seminole Indians, I think, come out on top if we do the math.
Yeah.
Indians were 6 feet tall, and the Seminole Indians are the closest remaining survivors of those Timucua Indians I was showing you earlier. So I think what we'd expect to find is 9 foot people, 9 foot chiefs 500 years ago. Over time, they got shorter and shorter and shorter. They're eating more and more processed food. They're living more of a Western lifestyle, modern.
Somebody said they're working in casinos, so that's not helping.
Yeah.
6'6" and 300 pounds.
Yeah, and this is in the late 1800s or early 1900s.
Wow.
Maybe this is the 50s. I forget. Tampa Tribune, 1950.
Wow.
Yeah, 1950. So as late as 1950, these guys are still 6.5 feet tall. You know, a lot of them.
It almost sounds like we've devolved.
These guys went barefoot all day. They drank a lot.
What's the importance of that, Dr. Longo, that they went barefoot?
Your toes spread out, and it ensures proper development to the rest of your skeleton. Why do basketball players get so tall? They're doing things. They're reaching up. You know, just that slight change in lifestyle.
Interesting.
It does welcome increased height. Now, there are short basketball players, but I do think playing basketball literally makes you taller. There's just, how can you explain how basketball players routinely grow 3 inches or more even after they're 18 years old. You know what I mean? It happens all the time where basketball players who's already fully grown keeps growing even after their college career. Right. So I think
I don't want to be Jimmy the Greek, but over 85% of the basketball players are black. Yeah. Slaves were selectively bred for lots of years. The biggest, the strongest, the tallest. That could still be in the gene pool.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But we've also kind of already discussed that there were tall black people in America 500 years ago.
Absolutely.
In the same places that we kind of find them today. So,
and you said there's indigenous black people in America. They weren't all brought over on slave ships.
I do believe that.
Mainly Mississippi?
Yes. Not so much Florida. Closer to the Mississippi is what I think.
Interesting.
But also, here, let's get through this real quick.
All right.
I want to show you some of these guys and how
I love some of the names.
Chipko was about 6'2" well, here. Not as an anthropologist, but as a layman who knows personally many of the present-day Seminoles. Mr. Devane lists those he knows to be 6 feet or taller, and Billy Bowlegs III adds the names of others who have passed on to their happy hunting grounds. And again, we're not just getting validation of the height that the early explorers were reporting. We're also going to get some validation on the lifespan that they were reporting. Remember they said 300 years, 9 feet tall?
Right.
We'll leave some room for exaggeration, but what are they finding right up until 1950? 6'4", 6'6", and 103 years old, 119 years old. The Seminole Indians routinely lived to over 100 years old. Wow. Billy Bowlegs III, he lived to 103, and he danced, walked, did everything himself right up until the very end. Stood straight up. So, yeah, what do we see? We won't read this whole thing, but 6'2", 6'3", 6'6", over 6 foot, 6'6" again, almost 300 pounds. And we're not talking a fat 300 pounds. We're talking like a tight end 300 pounds, you know. And this is the list goes on and on. Every name listed on here is over 6 feet, and they only specify the heights of some of them. But Big Charlie, 6'4", Henry Cypress, 6'4". Yeah, and then down here, the sheriff found a bunch of bones, and he said those belonged to 7 foot tall people. So he's bridging the gap here from the living generations to the extinct generations in the mounds. And again, you can just look up any old famous Seminole and just ask their height. Ask Google their height. You'll see for yourself. They're all over 6 feet tall.
Amazing.
Yeah. The promising basketball career of Trustin Pierce, a Seminole Indian. 6'5" basketball player, you know. He almost made it to the NBA. Here's Captain Tom Tiger, 6 feet 6 inches.
Holy crap. Looking
very Celtic too. Scottish.
Yes.
This guy wore a lot of plaid, or what do they call it? Tartan.
Tartans, yeah.
Yeah. Henry Cypress, 6'4". Billy Bowlegs, 6'2". Lived to over 100 years old. Seminole Chief Chipko, 6'2". Guy on the left is 6'2". What's the guy on the right? Tall is what he is.
That's exactly right.
I've got pictures and pictures, more and more. Who's ever seen The One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest?
Yep.
That Indian, Chief, I forget his name, Chief Bromden, or I forget. But that chief in The One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he's 6'7". He's a Muskogee Indian. So, you know, he's a cousin to these Seminoles also. Right there for everyone to see. Tall people. They have the legacy of this height. And these might just be the half-breeds between the normal-sized humans and the 8-footers too, you know? That's about it. I think we covered every base here.
We did.
The 500-year-old firsthand witness accounts. You've got the living, breathing Indians of today. You've got the bones to support those old accounts. And yeah, and also giraffes, cheetahs. These things become long and lanky and tall because of the flat places that they lived. So we know that Florida would be conducive to the lengthening of limbs like we see in the flat parts of Africa that have extremely tall people, extremely tall animals, and extremely lanky animals. So Florida is the homeland and was the homeland of a giant race of men, multiple races of giant men.
Great stuff, Dr. Longo.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
My pleasure. That was really good stuff. So we'll have to get together again and do our little debate/discussion.
Christianity, right?
I hope you can convert me so I can start making some money again.
What's wrong? The pagans don't pay as well as
Well, when you are the Christian whistleblower and you're calling into question these sacred things, then yeah, you tend to not be on the sit at the popular kids table.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're probably an expert at pointing out Sunny D and pointing out Orange Fanta and pointing out pasteurized orange juice. I think that we're going to have a lot to agree on about the unpasteurized orange juice.
I'm looking forward to it. I really am.
Because everyone can point out the faults of the church or the hypocrisies or, you know, of the followers and things like that. But yeah, we'll see.
We will see. And I think we'll have a good time.
100%. I'm amped.
Me too, brother. All right. Hey, thanks so much for this. This was fantastic. Can't wait till next time. I'm so glad that my friends Mike and Kim put me on to you. I'm glad my son watches you. I hope that all your subscribers will keep supporting you. And if y'all want to come over and have some entertainment, you know where to find me.
Yeah, guys, for my people, go give Jeff a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, thanks for having me, Jeffrey. Good stuff again.
Anytime I can help you with anything, let me know, Dr. Longo. We appreciate you very much.
Cool. Thank you.
All right.
Likewise.
Take care, brother. Take care. And that is Dr. Longo from Old World, Florida. That was a great, great night. Thank you, Lord Zed. We appreciate it. Great to hear from all of you. It was a lot of good times, a lot of good fun. We appreciate you very, very much. Mod link, please. What do you mean? Make you a moderator? That's fine with me. We'll do it. We appreciate y'all. We got up to over 700 watching this stream. And I mean, this is the good stuff. This is the good stuff. And we're just getting started. We appreciate y'all very, very much. And we look forward to seeing you again real soon. We'll be back again with Dr. Longo. And we just want you to remember that this world's going to be better than it's ever been, sooner than even we can imagine. And I appreciate you. And we'll see you again very, very soon. I sure hope so. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty. We appreciate y'all. And I love all you folk and kin. Talk to you soon.